Hi, and welcome to the Changing Perspectives podcast, the show where we discuss a variety of topics, including grief, parenting, relationships, mental health, and pop culture. Join us and explore a number of changing perspectives. We're your hosts, Jenni and Josh Brennan. Hey, Jenni.
Hi.
So what do you think? Does that work for you?
I wasn't listening.
You weren't listening.
No.
What we're talking about, everybody, is the intro. Jenni gave me some feedback last time. She wasn't really happy with the way the topics were laid out.
Oh, well, I think I
Right.
don't usually listen, so I was listening. And
You were listening.
because I just updated the Changing Perspectives website and sort of and our YouTube channel for our podcast, the sort of categories of our topics and my topics for writing are on the brain. So I caught it that they were not aligned.
Right. So we align them. Were you listening?
I mean, you had talked to me before about what you were going
Yeah.
to say, so I'm assuming it's the same.
It is the
I
same.
feel like I have to apologize for my frog voice.
Uh-oh.
I have a
Frog
froggy
voice.
voice, yeah.
Yeah. Why is that?
Allergies, yeah. This is the allergies
are
of
kicking your butt.
the past 2 days, yeah. Like this happens. And I don't quite know what it is that I'm allergic to, but I'm on 3 different kinds of meds and they're not really working that great.
Some sort of environmental vector out there.
I probably should take my
is
asthma.
hunting you down.
I probably should take my asthma meds.
Probably.
After this, I will.
That's a good idea.
I'll take my inhalers. So
Welcome.
you're just all going to have to deal with my. When I taught preschool, one of my students said,
Yeah.
"Miss Brennan." No, I was Miss Jen.
Miss Jenni.
It was Miss Jen.
Oh.
Miss Jen, you have your frog voice today.
All right, frog voice. So welcome to episode 76, Jenni, and everybody listening. We hope you thoroughly enjoyed episode 75, where we got a chance to hang out with our good friend Gila Pfeffer, coming to us from the UK. Such a fun episode. If you haven't had a chance to check that one out, please do so. We're on a nicely, kind of on a good clip right now, Jenni, at least once a week, giving you guys some content. We hope we can continue to do that.
But we'll find out because school
We'll find
started
out.
for us this
Yes,
week. So,
school just started.
and we're not doing this live because I've got no energy,
Right.
and because if my voice poops out, we can shut off
Yeah,
and come back.
exactly.
Apparently, Norma Jean is also pooped this weekend because
She
she's
was wide awake
she was-
5 minutes ago.
as soon as we turned on the mic, she passed out and she's
As soon
snoring.
as we hit record, now she's snoring.
All right, so what are we talking about?
I am enjoying the live streams with you. And
Actually, I'm too.
Yeah, we'll try to do that as much as we can.
Yeah.
But hey, changingperspectivesonline.com. That's the new website. Check it out. Go head on over there. Sign up for the newsletter. And before we dive into an ad read, I just wanted to ask Jenni if she could tell everybody about some exciting stuff in the world of merchandise for us.
So we are launching some new merchandise designs, and some new merchandise.
Yeah.
So by the time this goes live on Monday, we will have some Halloween merchandise and fall and Christmas.
Yeah.
And stuff for coffee lovers and pet lovers.
Yes.
And then some motivational stuff because that's kind of what we do. Jacob says we should also do one that says like lean into it, like some of our kind of catchphrases. This is a stretch
How
for
about
me.
say bye, Jenni?
That's what he said. I said no one would buy that.
The Changing Perspectives fans would, I guess. Hey,
So-
if you're interested in a Say Bye, Jenni t-shirt or hat or something, or a mug that says Say Bye, Jenni, let us know.
Well,
Reach out to us.
I guess any ideas, right? Like
Yeah, any
if
ideas.
there's stuff. This is a stretch for me because I'm not creative. I can write and I can talk, sometimes better than others. But this creative stuff is a stretch for me.
Yeah.
So I'm also kind of using some design tools and so sort of working that other side of my brain. So
Well,
open to
I
some
think
suggestions.
this is consistent with the brand, so to speak, or your goal, your mission in Changing Perspectives, and trying to give folks, some motivation or some just sort of good feeling things to read and to look at, and to also to laugh at. Some of your GIFs and memes that are coming out recently are just
Yeah,
hilarious.
that's also a stretch for me to try to sort of not always just be serious. So
Well, I think that coming up with some different things for folks to buy if they're interested in is consistent with like things like the newsletter and your Wednesday wisdom and
right.
just putting out some feel good stuff for people.
I'm trying.
So
I'm trying. It's hard when I don't feel good, but
speaking of
trying.
not feeling good, folks, Changing Perspectives is brought to you guys by BetterHelp.com. That's BetterHelp.com. BetterHelp is an online counseling resource who makes professional counseling accessible, affordable, and convenient. They offer 4 ways to get licensed counseling through video sessions, phone call, live chat, and messaging. As everyone knows all too well, these are challenging times, and the broad expertise of the BetterHelp Counselor Network could provide anyone struggling with life's challenges the help they need, anytime, anywhere. Whatever struggles you're facing, whether it's depression, grief and loss, anxiety, BetterHelp.com can provide you the counselor that's the right fit. Visit BetterHelp.com/changingperspectives. After signing up, you will be matched with a counselor in 24 hours or less. Again, visit BetterHelp.com/changingperspectives. Okay, everyone. Well, the BetterHelp ad, the live read, is actually kind of a nice segue into what we're going to be talking about today. And we are dusting off a theme that we've done a fair amount of times in the past. I enjoy these episodes, Jenny. But we're about to do a Myths About.
That's right.
Another Myths About.
I don't remember the last time we did a Myths About, but I enjoy them.
A year ago, we did Myths About Pit Bulls, speaking of Norma Jean, because it's a Pit Bull Awareness Month coming up in October.
Okay.
And we did one last year about that. I think we did one after that, though, but I can't remember. But today we're going to be talking about depression. Myths about depression. A little bit of a heavier topic, but something obviously Jenny's an expert in, subject matter expert in a big way. Both of us have personal experience with mental health issues, depression. We kind of talked about that in the Dak Prescott episode, the bonus episode we released a little bit ago. But yeah, we thought it was really time to really talk about, the myths and misconceptions, or, I think that depression and mental health issues are a lot more ubiquitous than people realize, meaning a lot of folks may or may not be dealing with something similar to depression or just a mental health issue in general, stress, anxiety, whatever that is. Mm-hmm. So, Jenny, tell us, why you wanted to do today's episode.
So was it 2 episodes ago that we talked about Dak Prescott,
Skip Bayless.
Yeah.
Episode 74, everyone. Check that out if you haven't listened to that one yet.
There was a lot of conversation about that one, both during the live recording and after, like on social media and just in talking with people. And I think it really kind of sparked a renewed sort of need for this topic to be talked about sort of openly. And I don't think this has been on our list to do from the beginning, really.
Actually,
and we haven't done it. So I felt like it was time to kind of circle back around to this. I think also this time of year, I know no one's going to be happy. Well, some people will, but we're kind of coming up to the end of September now. And so we're heading into the holiday season, and we're already at the part of the year where, especially for us in the Northeast, days are getting shorter. The sun is setting earlier, and there's less sunlight because the sun is just kind of at a different position. And so here in New England, we often see a lot of sort of depression spikes this time of year because, sort of seasonal affective disorder. But I also think just from being in New England, people start to spend more time indoors and so isolate more. And so I think that this time of year, it's really important to kind of keep it on our horizon.
Well, now especially, with this year and everything that it has brought with it, people started to have some respite from the stress of 2020 and the pandemic and COVID-19 by being able to get out finally, but to hang out outside.
Right.
Do different events outside, restaurants, having outdoor seating that don't normally. But now, to your point, it's going to start getting cooler. We notice it here in New England on a daily basis. I actually love it. It reminds me of football. But then I get sad because there's no football for the boys. Anyway, it's going to start getting colder. People are going to have to be inside more. And maybe those, opportunities to get outside and get outside the house are going to start going away. And that could
or at least being harder to sort of find.
Exactly.
They won't come so naturally.
Right. Well, we've got a fair amount of different links and resources and such to share with you all for this episode, but we're going to start off with sort of the basics. Let's define depression. And I chose a Mayo Clinic. Mayo Clinic is usually a great resource for medical things, but they have a definition for depression, which I'm going to read. Depression is a mood disorder that causes a persistent feeling of sadness and loss of interest, also called major depressive disorder or clinical depression. It affects how you feel, think, and behave, and can lead to a variety of emotional and physical problems. You may have trouble doing normal day-to-day activities, and sometimes you may feel as if life isn't worth living. And then they go on to say, more than just a bout of the blues, depression isn't a weakness, and you can't simply snap out of it. Depression may require a long-term treatment, but don't get discouraged. Most people with depression feel better with medication, psychotherapy, or both. So that is actually a really great resource at Mayo Clinic website that I was going through. But I wanted to sort of talk a little bit about the definition of depression, just to start off with, which kind of leads us really into talking about the myths that we're going to go through today. And I'm gonna put my co-host / clinical therapist specialist on the spot as we go through these myths to help us dispel them. And then I guess really taking an opportunity, folks, to check out that Mayo Clinic website so you can read some of what they are laying out for you with regards to treatment and definition and whatnot. So we're going to talk more about treatment and how to get help a little bit later. But let's start off with these myths, Jenny. This first one, are you okay if we start with the myths?
Yeah.
You ready to dive in?
Yeah, it's a myths about, so
Myths
yes.
about.
Mm-hmm.
Myth number 1, depression is just another word for sadness. It's not a real condition. How often has a myth come up for you in a professional setting? Is that like a common thing, or by the time folks are reaching out to you?
No. I mean, well, yeah, I think if people, I guess professionally, I haven't really seen anyone that's coming to me or to whom I've provided support that thinks it's not real, that it's just kind of sadness. Word that myth again.
Depression is just another word for sadness. It's not a real condition.
Yeah, no, I would say that most people, by the time that they are ready to go to therapy, and kind of invest their energy and time into the therapeutic process, have probably done some research on depression. However, their families and friends may share that myth, or may believe that myth. So I feel like that's where the disconnect comes in. I think that a lot of people think, well, because we can say like, I feel depressed, right? So people kind of think when you say I feel depressed, that's synonymous with I feel sad. So you can just like snap out of it. But that's not what depression is. And I always think of it in terms of like big D and little d. Like depression, little d, or depressed, can be sort of a feeling that we feel, right? We can feel depressed. That's little d, depression. But when we're talking about big D, depression, that is not this like fleeting feeling, this fleeting moment. It is really pervasive and something that takes over kind of every day, all day. And there may be moments where it's not as kind of heavy or not as big, but it's still there.
Right. Now, let's cover something sort of, I think, maybe obvious, but depression is an official diagnosis, correct?
Did you say is?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Because I think people, tying into that first myth, probably don't realize that depression is an official medical diagnosis. Yes.
Yes, probably the people that believe that myth. Yeah, they're probably also people that believe it's made up, I guess.
Right. Now, you said that there's a lot of sort of people maybe in your system or your surroundings or your network that feel that way, right? How do you navigate those relationships? Is that something you should just, if you are able to, sort of steer clear, maybe seek out some other friends? Like, how do you deal with the fact, okay, this is something I'm dealing with. I have the big D. and I'm dealing with this and I'm seeking out help. Maybe I'm even on medication, whatever it is, but I've got these folks that are in my circle that feel as though it's fake, or they don't, it's not something they believe in. Kind of like people don't believe in COVID, but that's a whole other episode. But it's something, it's not something you believe in or not. It's an actual medical diagnosis. And so how do you navigate, how do you deal with that? What is your advice to a patient that comes to you and says, listen, my best friend thinks that I should just get over my sadness?
Well, it's hard because obviously it's an opportunity for education, right? And there's lots of resources out there and tools with which you can use to educate others. But if you are someone who is struggling with depression, and it takes all of your energy to get out of bed, go to work, take a shower, pick up the phone and talk to someone, you probably don't have the energy to do that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. So I think it's important for there to be things like this, right? Where sort of information is being put out there into the general public so that they have it when and if one of their loved ones is going through it. Because I just don't know that it's something that should rest on the shoulders of the person that has the depression.
Right.
But if they do have the ability to do that, they can, share some websites, send some text, have some conversations about it. There's also a cultural component. There are many cultures that don't really believe in mental illness, that believe that, and religions too. So believe that there's something wrong with your soul or your spirit, or it's from the devil that this is happening, or a spell has been placed on you. And these are cultures and religions that live here in the United States, that live abroad as well. And this is, these are deeply rooted beliefs. And so it's not as simple sometimes as just providing some education.
Right. Do you think that's actually a good point about the culture piece. Do you think that the American culture has gotten better, more accepting?
Yeah, I do. I think it has, for sure. I think we still have a long way to go. I think that whole Skip Bayless, Dak Prescott stuff that happened last week exposed how far we have come in America around it, that there were so many people that immediately were calling Skip out for his comments, but also exposed that there are still quite a number of people that share Skip's beliefs that, if you have depression, and certainly if you talk about the fact that you have depression or have struggled with it, you are weak, and you do not belong in positions of power like quarterbacks or CEOs. So there are certainly, Skip Bayless is not the only person that believes that, right?
You actually just transitioned us to the next myth without even knowing it.
Look at that.
Wow. Must be that advanced degree you have in mental health. If you have depression, you are weak. Myth number 2.
Yes.
You can't handle stress. And that's just obviously not true. I mean, all of these are not true because that's why we're talking about them. But you definitely don't have weakness because you're depressed.
Yeah, I mean, depression is nothing that anyone chooses to have or wants to have. And I think unless you've experienced it, and you've experienced, days where you just can't get out of bed, or you just can't bring yourself to take a shower, or you just can't bring yourself to talk to friends, or it's all you can do to eat, or all you can do to not eat. Unless you've experienced that, it is really hard for people to understand that, because all they have to sort of compare it to is I've been sad before, and then I snapped out of it and got over it. Kind of get over yourself. That's something we hear people say a lot. Get over yourself. You're not the only one that's sad or feels sad about things. But that's simply not true. It's not that easy.
That's got to be so hurtful. I mean, to have someone in your circle, in your life, that you hear say that, either about you or about depression in general. I've luckily never been in that type of situation personally, but I can't imagine that that's something easy to deal with. It's to someone around you that says, get over it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I have, not directly to me, but about someone else. But then it, allowed me to sort of share my own experiences with depression and how it's not, so in that moment, I was able to sort of provide some education, both as a clinician and also as someone who has struggled with depression in my life. And and that person certainly did not say it directly to the other person, but kind of behind their back. So, like it stung because clearly, if I was down in sort of a low point of depression again, that might be something that person would say about me.
Is that where the weakness comes from? Like the assumption that someone who's depressed is weak because they can't just fix it? Mm-hmm. That's what it is?
Yeah. That like you can't, well, there's all these sort of memes and sort of toxic positivity out there, like choose happiness. It's all about your perspective. Like just wake up with a grateful heart.
Right.
And I say stuff like that too sometimes. If you follow on any of the social media, sometimes, although I try really hard to not say choose happy, and I try really hard to not come across with toxic positivity, but that is out there. This sort of belief that like it's all mindset. And if you could just, read enough sort of self-help books and just sort of be grateful enough and do enough sort of gratitude journaling that you can fight it and overcome it. And if you're doing that stuff and it's not enough to make the depression go away, then there's something wrong with you. You're not strong enough. You're weak.
Can you go back a second and explain gratitude journaling? I don't know what that is.
Sure. I actually think you should do it.
Okay.
Grumpy. Gratitude journaling. So, journaling, I think there are lots of people that do journal, right? They kind of, they sort of write somehow daily about like what their day looked like.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it starts sort of as like teenagers. That's kind of how I think of it. Like kids, like Dear
Facebook?
Diary. Yes. So social media is in some way sort of journaling, right?
I was being facetious, but.
Well, and I would say sometimes, my more personal writings are essentially kind of journal-ish. But there are lots of people who don't like to write, who the thought of like, buying a journal and writing about like my day and my feelings every day, that sounds gross. So you could instead sort of get a journal or a notebook on your phone or an actual notebook and get into the habit of every morning or every night before you go to bed, writing down. And then you can hear the opportunities are limitless in terms of how you can make it personal, but write down one thing that you're grateful for. I actually have one of my clients, this was their homework assignment this week because they don't have a diagnosis of depression, but they are feeling pretty hopeless at this point and just feeling kind of negative. Like a lot of people who wind up in sort of what I call quarter life crisis, you go through elementary, middle, high school, college, and then you're like, okay, great, now my life begins. Like everything all the adults promised me is going to happen now. Like I'm going to easily get a job. I'm going to live on my own. Adulthood's going to be great. And then they realize like, oh, holy crap, this is really hard. And I'm not where I thought I would be at 23 or 24. And I don't know where I'm going because this sort of very defined path ends and it doesn't end at the place I thought it would end. And so they struggle with feeling hopeful and feeling kind of positive. So this particular client asked for something that would help them reframe their focus. And so they are working on a gratitude journal. So before bed or in the morning, just kind of writing down 1 to 3 things from that particular day that they are grateful for and really working hard for it not to be like my health, my friends, my family, but maybe like
something more specific and smaller.
Like the person in front of me at Dunk's paid for everyone's coffee or
that's cool.
My neighbor like stopped on their way by and asked me how my day was going, something like that.
Yeah.
And then sort of the next level is what are things that maybe you could be grateful about yourself or proud of for yourself. So gratitude journaling is really kind of limitless in terms of the options, but that's sort of what I mean when I say gratitude journaling. So that can be a technique to help sort of manage depressive symptoms, but it's not like a cure-all. It's not like, if you do your gratitude journal for a week,
everything's going to be fine.
Everything's fine. And if not, it's because you're weak. No.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, that was
Definitely
it.
not.
No, full stop, period.
Full stop. People who have depression are not weak.
Right.
Period. The end.
Right.
Yeah.
Are you falling asleep right now?
No.
You look like you are. Your energy is just super low.
My what?
Your energy is super
My energy is low?
Yeah.
Maybe I should gratitude journal out of my low energy.
Maybe.
I don't know. No, I feel good.
Okay.
I'm awake.
Okay.
Ready to go.
Okay.
Ready to go on to the third myth.
Okay.
Okay. You don't need therapy or treatment. just get over it.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's kind of right. That's sort of what I was just saying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You can't just get over it. Right. I mean, sometimes I think
Right.
people, or oftentimes people,
Well, going back to what you just said, you can't choose happy.
you can't choose happy.
That would indicate getting over it.
I think there are people that can sort of make it through a depressive episode without therapy, right? They kind of like, they sort of ride the wave and make it through, and they come out the other side. So they're not quite feeling as low. Maybe they did do it without therapy or medication, but that probably took a whole lot of energy out of them and probably impacted their lives in some negative ways. And it might be easier for them the next time if they did have the support of therapy or medication. In actually both.
Can I ask you a question?
Mm-hmm.
Why is the thought of therapy so scary to people?
Well, one, because there's still stigma around it. Like, I think this is changing, and I feel like it's changing more in the past 5 years or so. But for a long time, it was like secretive to like have a therapist, right? Like, it wasn't something you would just openly share, like, oh, I can't go out. I'll come and get dinner with you, but I have therapy until 7, so I'll come by after, right? Like, there wasn't that kind of level of openness before. I think that now there is in a lot more circles. So it was this like taboo, like something was wrong with you. And I think that comes from generations, right? Like, if we look at what the greatest generation, is that the generation before the boomers? I think so.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
So the
Sorry,
greatest
I had a generation mind.
people that were getting mental health help back then were institutionalized, were looked at as crazy, certainly didn't talk about it. It was hush hush. And so that sort of attitude towards mental health and mental illness was passed down to the next generation. So I guess sort of the boomers, but I feel like maybe I'm missing a whole generation there. I don't know. My generations are not so great. But that was passed down. And then those people that kind of grew up in like the 50s and 60s, still had that like, well, just pull yourself up by the bootstrap mentality.
Yeah, right.
And if you do have a depression or an anxiety or something's wrong with you, then that's a secret and you should not talk about it. You should not bring shame on your family. If you need to go get help, fine, but you could go away and do it. So like temporarily get institutionalized or hospitalized, right? And then come back and let's not talk about it.
That seems so intense and such an overreaction.
Well, and so negative, right? And so then there's so many families who, our generation and our parents and our grandparents and the great grandparents, who those generations above us have these like secretive mental health issues, right? Because they weren't talked about openly. They were secretive. And so there's this whole like piece of family history that's missing for a lot of families because of that negativity, because great grandma wasn't going to share that she had depression and needed to take medication and was like hospitalized for a little bit. Yeah. And grandma wasn't going to tell you that either because it was a secret that she never knew about her mom, right? So it's all this kind of secretive stuff. And now it's still relatively new for like our generation, the generation before us, to kind of openly seek help as just part of their normal functioning. So to answer your question, why is it so hard? Because it's relatively new, that it's kind of open.
Yeah.
That there's an openness around it.
Those are some really interesting points, Jenny.
But it also is really hard. It's hard to walk into a stranger's office, or today turn on your camera and talk to a stranger about really personal things, right? Because you don't know, can you trust this person? Yes, they should have a license and you should be able to trust them, but it's also about kind of personality fit and approach fit. And so, are you going to feel comfortable and safe sharing all that information? Are they going to judge you? So just walking through the door is really hard. Just picking up the phone or sending the email to make the appointment is hard. And then sitting in that space is hard. And then going back, right? I think the time sort of building up to your first appointment and then after your appointment is a time of like deep sort of introspective thought and looking into yourself. And that's emotionally and mentally exhausting. So it's hard.
Well,
that's why.
It can be a lot of work. Right.
For sure.
And I think that people probably, my guess is that people that are dealing with depression, sometimes find it hard to do things, including
going to therapy for
right?
sure. Mm-hmm.
And do the work associated with,
yeah, because
their treatment.
listen, I don't have a magic wand, and so I'm not doing work. I'm creating the space for the patients to do the work, and I'm helping them sort of identify the tools that might work in their life, but they're the ones doing the work. And so they're the ones who are putting in the most effort, and
Right.
it's really, really hard, which is why, especially when we talk about depression and also anxiety, I'm not someone who, if you come see me, I'm like, great, let's get you a prescriber and let's get you on an anti-anxiety or an antidepressant. But there are, because I think sometimes we are too quick as a society to throw medication at everything. But there are lots of times where I will encourage that, because the antidepressant and or an anti-anxiety medication, depending on what we're talking about, can sort of make it easier for the individual to then do the work. Right. It just kind of lifts the floor up a little bit for them, so it's easier for them to do the work.
I feel like there's another episode coming about the history of mental health and mental health treatment.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because I'm thinking, like, as you're going through, why people are nervous about therapy and treatment, I just kept thinking about, like, all of those past, like, pop culture references to asylums and mental health hospitals and all these, like, this negativity. I mean, this whole, like, horror movies and comic books, graphic novels centered around asylums and how bad it could be, and hospitalization for the mentally ill. I mean, it's steeped in such negativity. It's just really interesting, the history there. And I mean, no wonder why people are nervous to get treated,
mm-hmm.
to go get help.
Right.
Can you talk for a few minutes? I know you sort of just mentioned it, but can you just chat with us about, like, a little side myth about treatment and, like, medications to treat depression? Can you give us the basics as to what they actually do and how they can help?
Well, I guess in a nutshell, they sort of, they operate on the belief that when we'll talk about depression, in some cases, there's actually sort of a chemical sort of alteration in your brain that is causing neurons to fire in a certain way that are leading you to sort of experience depression. And so the medications really kind of alter those brain firings, those brain functions. They sort of re-normalize, not that you're not normal if you have depression, but they sort of clear up those pathways so they're a little bit neater for you.
Yeah.
They don't, and here's something that kind of grows out of former generations, because the medications we have now are much better than the medications we used to have, right? So those families that, have like a great grandmother or a grandmother who was on an antidepressant at one point and it knocked her out, like she was snowed for a whole week, or it made her a zombie. Those are true stories, but the medications we have now don't do that anymore.
Because I hear a lot of people talk about, not a lot of people, but they say things like, "Oh, I don't want to be numb."
Yeah.
Right?
And it's not a magic pill, right? And there's a variety of different medications, but they're not magic pills that suddenly make you happy. Although, some people will be like, "Oh, I have to take my happy pill," but it's not a pill that's actually going to make you happy. It's a pill that's going to sort of regulate your brain chemistry in a way so that you won't probably be as depressed. So I always sort of explain it as it sort of lowers the ceiling and raises the floor a little bit. So your depressive lows won't go so low. And so your highs and lows won't be so vastly different.
So your recommendation, if I dare to assume what that might be, is to, if you're on medications, it should be coupled with therapy.
For sure.
Okay.
Yes. And I think for sure. And I think you don't necessarily have to be on medication if you're in therapy. Because sometimes you can have a depression that's because of an adjustment in your life, sort of like an adjustment disorder with depression. And And so medication might not really be a good fit for you. You might not need the medication.
Right.
Really what you might need is to sort of process what's going on in your life, the changes, kind of work through some things you can do to sort of make your life a little more balanced, ways to sort of manage stress, right? So it's not that you're not having depression because of a chemical thing going on in your brain. You're having depression because of a situational thing in your life that maybe we could make some changes around.
Right. Okay.
And so sometimes we don't know that right away until we sort of start peeling away the layers and understanding things. But certainly if we're talking about like suicidality and thoughts of suicide, thoughts of self-harm, those are the situations in which I always say, okay, medication is where we're going to go first. And I'm not a prescriber. So often it means this is also where it's hard. This is a difficulty with our mental health system. It means going to someone who can prescribe medications. You can go to your primary care physician, but some are better than others, right? And some have done a lot of training, some have studied, some really, understand. And others are just like, I don't know, let's try Lexapro. I don't know, I've heard good things about it. Try it. And if this doesn't work, I don't know, you're going to have to go see someone else, right? Like I'm not making that up. Those are real conversations that happen. So the better bet is, or the better sort of option is to see someone who specializes in that, like a psychiatrist or a psychiatric nurse practitioner. But boy, are those hard to find.
Yeah.
And there's
Especially
long wait
those
lists.
taking new patients, right?
And especially then you have to work in like insurance issues and scheduling. So it's hard to find them.
Do you think that people's reluctance to begin therapy or some sort of treatment is a, sort of denying what's actually happening? Like going back to what you had said a little bit ago about, people just sort of thinking that they can deal with it on their own, or if I just get through this next whatever, I'll be fine and I'll deal with it, or self-medicating through whatever. I think that's a real thing that people just go, okay, I'm just going to get through this. I'll change. Like it might not be the people around you saying, oh, just go choose happy. It might be you saying, I'm just going to choose happy.
Well, I think it's tied into that stigma too, right? Like if I can't do this on my own and I need to go to see a therapist and or a prescriber, that must mean something is wrong with me because I don't know anyone else in my life who is doing this. Which is not true. Really quickly, can we jump to the statistics part? Because I know you pulled some statistics. Oh, you're looking at me crazy.
Well, we have a couple more myths.
I know, but it ties in with what I'm saying. So what did you pull for statistics? Kind of this like, if I go, there must be something wrong with me because nobody else is going through this. I'm guessing that you have some numbers that are going to show that is a myth.
So this is from, I want to pull up the reference, the National Institute for Mental Health.
That is a good reference.
NIMH, and it's nih.gov, and we're going to share the links to everybody. And this is from studies from 3 years ago, which is the most recent, by the way.
Okay.
Nearly 1 in 5 U.S. adults live with a mental illness. 1 in 5. That's 46.6 million people in 2017.
Okay.
An estimated 17.3 million adults in the U.S. had at least one major depressive episode. This number represented 7.1% of all U.S. adults. Can you take a second and define major depressive episode? Is that just depression?
Yes, but I could pull out my DSM, which I think I have. I think I still have it in my actual office. I don't think I have it here. So I'm not going to read you the actual clinical definition, but basically we're talking about like big D, right? Like before we were talking about little d, we're talking about big D, where over a period of time you have these depressive symptoms that sort of permeate all areas of your life and impact your life in a significant way. We're not talking about like you've had some sad days. And there's all sorts of standardized tests that you can take, or you can take along with a licensed clinician to sort of see where you are in terms of a depression scale. And often we're looking at like the past 2 weeks. More often than not, have you felt kind of hopeless, or have you thought that you feel worthless, stuff like that. So that's what we're talking about.
Okay. The research goes on to say the prevalence of adults with major depressive episode was highest among individuals aged 18 to 25, 13.1%. That's significant. Do you see that professionally?
Yeah, I mean, well, talking about like the quarter life crisis that I was talking about earlier, that pathway, it's really hard for young adults.
That's about the time that I sought help.
Yeah, I think you went through a quarter life crisis.
I did.
For sure. Like not knowing like what did you want to do with your life? Where did you want to go? What did you had no clue. And I think we don't really talk about that a lot in society, that kind of like we're really doing our youth a disservice to think like this is just what you do. You go to elementary school, middle school, high school, and you pick like, are you going to go to a trade school or are you going to go to college? And if you're going to a trade school, pick what it is at 16 or 17 when your brain is still like 6 or 7 years away from being fully developed, and invest time and energy. And that's what you should do with the rest of your life. Same with college, right? Yeah. Like, okay, now go into like mountains of ridiculous debt and studying something you think you might want to do with the rest of your life, right? And then they come out and they realize like, I'm not happy and I don't know what I want to do when I grow up. And I don't know what makes me happy. And I don't know, I thought I'd be living in like a white picket fenced house with a significant other by the time I was 23 or 24, because that's sort of this American dream, and really, really normal for people in that age group to struggle.
Can I even say too, like the whole concept of quote quarter life crisis is almost, I think, looked at as tongue in cheek or not real. It's like, oh, I'm having a quarter life crisis kind of thing.
Well, I think we say that about like midlife crisis too.
Exactly. But it's, for a lot of people, it could be real, like a real, like, oh, I'm lost right now. Right. And that was the age that I sought help and was put on antidepressants and whatnot. Was about that same time. Right. Yeah. Of those numbers for adults, so 17.3 million adults, or actually, yes, no, 1 in 5 U.S. adults live with mental illness. So of that number, 35% did not receive treatment. Right. Crazy, right? That's a gigantic number, over a third.
I guess I would be wondering why. Was it because they were ashamed? Was it because they could not afford their insurance copays or deductibles? Because I've also seen
that's a lot of variables.
Just in the years since I opened my private practice and started managing sort of the insurance stuff on my own, insurances have gone really downhill, sort of universally, in that copayments have gone up for individuals. So I have individuals now who have copayments of like $40 a session. Used to be like $5 or $10 a session, or no copayments. So $40 a session. And a lot of insurances, ours included, have switched to a deductible plan. Yeah. And a lot of those deductible plans include behavioral health. And we're talking high deductible plans. Like you have to reach $6,000 to $7,000, sometimes $8,000 out of pocket costs before insurance will pick up anything. So for a lot of people, that means paying the insurance contracted rate, which just for like a Blue Cross, that's almost $85 a session that they would be paying out of pocket, not getting reimbursed by their insurance. That's a lot. And so there's a financial burden too. So I wonder, I'd like to see that statistic a little bit more. Why didn't they seek help? Was it because of shame? Was it because of money? Was it because they couldn't find someone? Was it because they tried and like their doctor, sort of poo-pooed them, or they tried and they didn't like the clinician, or they couldn't get into a psychiatrist? What was it about that? Because there are a lot of barriers still.
Right. I had prepared a couple more pieces of statistics to share with everybody. And this sort of we talked a little bit about this in the Dak Prescott episode, but it says an estimated 3.2 million adolescents aged 12 to 17 in the U.S. had at least one major depressive episode. This number represented 13.3% of the U.S. population aged 12 to 17.
Read that again.
3.2 million adolescents aged 12 to 17 had at least one major depressive episode. That's 13.3% of the population of that age range.
Right. Yeah.
That's a lot of kids.
I mean, there's a lot. I think we're doing better than we used to do with that age group. I mean, a lot of schools are starting to, but then they've just pulled a lot of them out. But we're starting to have like clinical social workers, school social workers, mental health professionals in the school buildings, because to sort of help with that growing need of addressing mental illness in kids. Because for as hard as it is for an adult to find support and services, it's even harder for adults to find that support for their children.
Right.
Finding therapy for kids.
That's the next step.
Oh, okay.
So you remember a moment ago, Jenny, we talked about 35% of adults did not receive treatment.
Yes.
It's 60% of adolescents
did
not receive treatment,
because
according to the study done in 2017.
Because I feel like, and again, this is sort of that generation stuff, right? So if the parents themselves are still feeling kind of shameful, or not quite sure that they believe in help or that they need help, then surely the kids are not going to.
That is just a gigantic number.
But because it is so hard. There are not enough clinicians out there that see children. Yeah. Listen, when I open my practice, and I'm part of the problem, when I open my practice, a bulk of my background, a huge bulk, is working with kids. I have my teaching certification. That's what I wanted to do. But it's just too much now that I'm a mom too. But also, and I did get paneled with insurance companies to take and see kids. It's so much work. Because it's not just like you have the session with the kid, but it's you have the session with their kid and you have to then coordinate with the parents. Right. And a lot of times it's parents that are not together. So it's both parents, and then the school and the physician and other clinicians that might be involved with the family. Right. And some insurances require a whole lot of extra hoops that you jump through, additional trainings, additional sort of documentation. And I decided it's just not worth it for me to do that. So I could see like one kid in my practice and sort of have 3 hours a week or so of collateral contacts and sort of follow up to do.
That's a lot.
Or I could see 3 adults.
Right.
And there's a lot of clinicians that make a similar decision like that. And it's not just like one person's schedule. It's then you have to coordinate with like the parent's schedule and the kid's athletic schedule, school schedule, all of that.
I think the answer
so it's hard.
is resources within school. I know 2020 is a whole different animal. We're not even going to go there, but I think the answer might be resources within the school system. Right.
Yeah.
But that's a huge number. 60%. That's a big number.
That's, you're shedding light on a huge problem here. Yeah. And clearly we're not doing a good job addressing the issue. Right. Schools know about it and they're trying, but already we put a lot of responsibility on the teacher's shoulders, right? So teachers are also supposed to like identify kids that might need support and refer them out. And listen, also when you're thinking about that age group, it's all about social stuff, right? And so if you're getting pulled out of your English class to go meet with Miss Brennan, and she's the school therapist, then everybody knows your business. Tough. And so you're not going to. So there are some schools that do what I think is a really lovely model where they require everyone to meet regularly with the school clinicians so that and sometimes your sessions might just be like, everything's cool, right? For 40% of you, but maybe 60% of them can actually use that support. Yes. And then nobody knows about it. So that stigma is kind of removed from the equation. But how do you do that? Model. Well, it's a model that requires funding.
Right.
And
where's the money? It
requires funding, and it also requires time. Right. So if you're talking about like high schools and the course load that's on our high schools children's shoulders now, which is way worse than it was for us. Yeah. So many of my patients that are college students say that college level work is easier than their high school level work because there's so much of it.
It's mind-boggling.
Crazy. Yeah. But where would those kids get pulled from for that stuff? So it's a logistical problem, but there are schools that do it.
Money, time, and resources.
Those are always the big issues. Yes. And then stigma. So judgment.
Well, 35% of adults didn't receive treatment in that study, 60% of adolescents. And the reason why those numbers are so sort of scary is because depression is serious. And that's the second to last myth, which is depression is not serious. Not true. Depression is serious. Really, any mental health issue or mental illness is serious. But I think a lot of people, that's another stigma or misconception, is that, okay, you're a little sad. Okay, it's not serious. And I think maybe that's, again, why folks choose not to seek out help or treatment individually, is because, well, this isn't serious. I can get over this, or I can distract myself with something else.
Right.
This thing that's going to, make me not think about it for a little while, which, again, feeds into that misconception of it being not serious. Do you see that professionally? People come to you and if you've got folks in their life saying this isn't serious, or why do you even do that? Why do you go to therapy? Or do you have patients that actually think that it's not serious?
About themselves? I would say no. I would say I have patients that come to me that have shame around it. And so we work on sort of normalizing that it's nothing to be ashamed of, and that there are a lot of people that have similar thoughts.
Right.
I would say I also have had clients or patients that come to me that express that are not in therapy with me for depression themselves, but maybe have someone in their life who, it sounds to me, based on how they're describing them, has sort of big D depression, and they have shared feelings like that it's not a big deal, especially during quarantine, when a lot of sort of partners were seeing each other a whole lot more than before, and so kind of working around providing some education and then sort of resources for them to give to their loved one around that. So I guess sort of the reverse is what I see.
That's interesting. And what just came to mind for me was, which kind of leads us to the last myth, but I don't want to go there too soon. My guess is that a lot of folks don't think postpartum depression is very serious either. Like it's a real thing. Like, oh, that's just a tired mom.
No, right? And I think that's also one that's on our list to do.
We could do a whole other episode, obviously.
Yes.
But I just want to, let's give people a little bit of a teaser, because a lot of people, I think, have that myth about postpartum, is that it's not serious. It's just no big deal. It's a tired mom.
It's the baby blues.
The baby blues, which is a drastic oversimplification of a serious
but the baby
condition.
blues are a thing, right? Because after delivery, there's huge hormonal fluctuations and sleep deprivation in the majority of cases, especially if you're also nursing and you're, the sole individual responsible for giving your baby nutrients. So the baby blues are a thing, right? Where, women might express that they're tearful, they're crying for no reason, their moods are shifting. That's what happens when hormones shift like that. Totally normal. But postpartum depression, and there's also postpartum anxiety, and there's also postpartum psychosis, are real, they're real clinical diagnoses, and they are real things. And I think for as much as there's still stigma around depression, boy, is there even more around postpartum depression, because then it's not just like you that's going through that depression. It's you as a mother who's going through that depression. And there's so much wrapped up in that. And then finding time for yourself to go to a therapist and go to a prescriber while you're caring for your newborn. Right. And sort of balancing like all of that other stuff, that's really
and
hard.
Not sleeping at night.
It's the sleep deprivation is huge. Huge. Yeah.
Well, again, Jenny, I think this has been the episode of transitions, because that transitions nicely into our last myth, which is depression is something women have, but not men.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess we're come full circle, right? Back to the Skip Bayless, Dak Prescott situation. That sort of toxic positivity, and sort of that like toxic masculinity too, right? Like be a man, be a man's man. Like if you have depression and you're a man, you are certainly weak. Right. It's not something that just women have. It is something that women and men have, and men sort of underreport it and seek help for it because of the stigma and the shame around it. And when we did the Dak Prescott Skip Bayless episode, we shared, sort of the sort of horrible next step when you have a depression that is not well treated, not well managed, not well supported, can be suicide. And we shared some of the suicide rates and how they are highest in the U.S. amongst the male population. And surely there's a connection between poor treatment, increased stigma, and those increased suicide rates.
Sorry, I'm trying to find it, but I thought I saw in the NIMH stuff differences between men and women, but I'll share that link so you guys can look at it yourself. But I thought for sure I saw a section about, seeking out treatment in men versus women, and which definitely supported that myth, that stigma that people assume that just because you're a guy, you can deal with it. And going back to what Skip Bayless ended up saying about Dak, is that it made him not a good leader. So it's like, not only are you weak, or this is not something men should have to deal with, or whatever, it will make you a bad leader or bad at your job because of the weakness element, right?
Right. But what does that have to do with the gender piece?
Because
are you suggesting that because he's a male, he's naturally a better leader?
No. That's what I'm saying. Skip said.
Okay.
About Dak.
So you think that underlying that, Skip has a belief that men are leaders, women are not?
Why wouldn't he?
Yeah, you're probably right.
Why? I mean, not just because he's an athlete, a professional athlete, but, would he say that about Serena Williams?
No, probably not.
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I assume no. But
yeah, because of his toxic masculinity, right? Like it's all about like men. It does seem that he, and there are lots of others, view sort of men as more powerful and more beneficial than women, more important. And so like they definitely shouldn't reveal mental illness or I guess even believe that it's true.
Right. Yeah. So those are all the myths we wanted to talk about today. I think there's 5 of them. We shared some statistics. I do have another section to talk about another, what to do if, how to seek out help. But do you have anything to add about the myths?
I don't. I think there's a lot of myths. I think we could do like a whole podcast. Yeah. Like multiple episodes about depression. We're just sort of skimming the surface here with the sort
5.
Yeah.
We're already almost at an hour.
Yeah. Like we didn't really get into specifics around treatment. Like what are the best treatment modalities? How long are you in therapy for? What are the medications? We didn't go to any of that.
We have so much to.
Yeah. But just sort of baseline, like surface level. What are the main sort of touch point ideas out there about depression, and let's dispel those myths.
National Institute for Mental Health has a section on their website about treatment, getting help for mental illness. And we will share this link. Obviously, if this is a crisis type situation, call 911 if you or someone you know is in immediate danger, or go to the nearest ER. NIMH has a list of other options like the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. It's 1-800-273-TALK, which is 8255. Again, 1-800-273-8255. They also have a crisis text line, which is cool. I didn't know this existed. You can text hello to 741-741. It's a crisis text hotline. It's available 24/7. All throughout the U.S., serves anyone in any type of crisis, connecting them with a crisis counselor who can provide support and information. So text hello to 741-741. They have a specific veterans crisis line. If you're a veteran, it's 1-800-273-TALK. Let's see. Disaster distress helpline. That's a different 800 number, 800-985-5990. There's lots of different options on here, and they have ways to find a healthcare provider or treatment. And of course, this day and age with technology, one of our sponsors is BetterHelp.com, And you guys heard our live read at the beginning of the episode, betterhelp.com, betterhelp.com. It's all virtual, and you can get matched up with a counselor. It's another great resource to get help. But again, this is just a very high-level depression episode. We wanted to talk about it as sort of a follow-up to the Dak Prescott, Skip Bayless episode that we did. But yeah, do you have anything else to add about how to get help? Or
Well, those were the resources that I provided to you. So those are good ones.
Yeah.
If you're looking for a therapist, I always think Psychology Today is a great place to go, because you can sort by insurance, you can sort by location, you can sort by the gender of the clinician, you can sort by the sort of specialty areas that they specialize in. And you can have links from there are links to their websites if they have their own websites, and you can contact them directly through Psychology Today. So that's a great sort of starting place if you're looking for a therapist. Also, you can try your primary care physician for a list of resources, and also your insurance company. So as much as I just badmouth the insurance company, also, some insurance companies will have behavioral health sort of supports. And so you can call their behavioral health line, and some insurance companies will do a good job of finding you a therapist, someone who's in network for them, who specializes in what you're looking for.
Awesome. I did also prepare to discuss the signs of depression. I know we're sort of towards the end of our episode here, but might as well share this. And before I read these, because this came right from the Mayo Clinic website, Jenny, and it's got a list of different sort of signs of depression. But correct me if I'm wrong. I'm going to assume this, but depression looks different in everybody, correct?
For sure.
Okay. So these are signs of depression. It could be things that you've experienced. You've got loved ones that have depression that you've seen these signs in them, but it doesn't necessarily mean if you have one of these that you have depression. But this is the list of signs that the Mayo Clinic had on their website, and they say loss of interest in things you enjoy, such as work or hobbies, low levels of motivation and energy, trouble sleeping, oversleeping, inability to concentrate, feeling anxious, angry or irritable, loss of appetite or overeating, feelings of sadness and hopelessness, thoughts of suicide. And then the Mayo Clinic goes on to say there are countless stigmas and misconceptions about depression. Find out what is true and what is false, and begin helping yourself or your loved one. So I mean, you can even tell the vast difference in those signs, from overeating to undereating, or not wanting to eat, or oversleeping, or not being able to sleep. I mean, these are two extremes,
right,
in a couple of these topics. So depression does look different in everybody, but there's a lot of similarities in sort of signs and symptoms, so to speak. So
yes, everybody's symptoms or presentation of depression can be different.
Yeah.
Also, I mean, there are some gender differences too. So a lot of men, we are kind of falling then into some stereotypes, which I don't like, but that's the way it goes. So I guess for men in particular, and also others, a symptom of depression, or a way that depression might manifest itself, is actually not through crying and sort of outwardly expressing sadness, but through irritability, like low patience, poor patience, kind of snapping, stuff like that, kind of comes off like you're being a jerk, when actually it might be depression, and that's how the depression is manifesting itself. So that's one that often gets missed. People will be like, I don't know why they're just being a jerk. They're being so mean, and they're, just moody all the time. That could be depression.
Right. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think of that there was differences in gender.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Jenny, I know this was a little bit of a heavy topic episode, but it's important. And again, we wanted to tie in our discussion about Skip and Dak, and really starting off with the overview of the misconceptions and myths, I think, is a good place to start.
Yeah.
With this, and we can do a deeper dive. We will do a deeper dive in some of these subtopics. But do you have anything else for us?
No, I think that was pretty much it. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have something very exciting to share. We have
We do?
a couple of new iTunes reviews
Okay.
that have come in, and we're happy to be able to read these over the air. That's what we promise. If you submit an iTunes review, you rated us and reviewed us, we will read that over the air. So we have a brand new one, and this iTunes review comes to us from username Rich_Jack. So I like that username, but I don't know if it's Jack describing Jack, like Jack is rich, or is it two names, or I don't know.
Boy, I didn't give thought
It's
to
up in
it.
the air. Who knows?
Okay.
So Rich_Jack says, highly recommend it. Listening to this podcast is an absolute pleasure to the ears. Difficult topics shared in a very easy and smart manner. Well, thank you, Rich Jack. Those are some kind words. I appreciate it. Hey, if you want to hear your iTunes review read over the air, go ahead and submit one. And by submitting reviews and rating us on iTunes, it allows more people to reach Changing Perspectives, and that's what we want. And today's episode, yes, was kind of heavy, difficult topic, but we hope spoke to you a little bit, and you're able to maybe learn a little bit about the myths and misconceptions. I'm gonna do the tag, Jenny. Are you ready to go for today?
I'm ready. Yes.
Right. Okay, everyone. That is going to do it for today. Thank you so much for listening. For today's show notes links, you can check out the mayoclinic.org, depression causes and symptoms and definition. I have a unitypoint.org article that talks about some of the other myths and misconceptions about depression to share with you, and of course, the resources from the National Mental Health Institute as well. As a reminder, folks, this episode was for education and entertainment purposes only. Should you need additional support, please contact your healthcare provider for information and referrals. Please follow us on Facebook, everybody, at Changing Perspectives Podcast, and on Instagram at Changing Perspectives Blog. You can send us an email to our new email address, which is info@changingperspectivesonline.com. Once again, that's info@changingperspectivesonline.com. You can also visit our website by going to changingperspectivesonline.com. And while you're there, don't forget to visit the shop and check out all of that new Changing Perspectives merchandise. Go ahead and subscribe to the show so you'll never miss an episode, and we will see you next time. Say bye, Jenny.
Bye, Jenny.
I definitely want that on a t-shirt, Jenny.
The Changing Perspectives podcast is produced, recorded, and edited by Dizzy Bird Studios. Copyright 2020. Please visit Dizzy Bird Studios on Facebook. Facebook.com/Dizzy Bird Studios.